Welcome to Focus Today. I'm your host, Perry Atkinson. A lot in the news about tariffs, and I hear all kinds of reports and what is happening with them and the impact. What an honor for us to have with us today Spencer Morrison. He's the author of Reshore, How the Tariffs Will Bring Our Jobs Home and Revive the American Dream. There's a picture of the cover of the book. He's a lawyer, a law instructor, and he's also focused with applied philosophy, empirical history, and practical economics. He's the chief editor of the National Economics Editorial. And a little bit of that landing page there on the screen. But check out the book called Reshore, How Tariffs Will Bring Home Jobs and Revive the American Dream. Again, a picture of the book on the screen there. Spencer, good to see you. How are you, friend?
Hey, I'm doing very well. Thanks for having me on the show.
You bet. Thanks for your time. So much to talk about. Well, from what I understand, the tariff income has hit about $29 billion. Is that about right for July?
It sounds about right.
Okay. So how are we to interpret this? Because so many mixed feelings about tariffs, and you're obviously pretty bullish on it, but that's a lot of income.
It's a lot of income. And I think it's really important that we talk about the sort of the purpose of tariffs in the long run. And this goes all the way back to 1791 when Alexander Hamilton wrote this amazing work called The Report on Manufactures. Alexander Hamilton, maybe you guys have heard of him. I think he was in a play.
Yeah,
something
right.
like that.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Well, anyways, Hamilton said that tariffs really have two dual purposes. The first purpose is to raise income for the new government. And the reason that he chose tariffs is because tariffs are an avoidable tax, which means that if the tariffs are raised too high, people will just buy American, right? This limits the size of the federal government because it limits the amount of tax revenue that can be raised. And of course, it limits the amount of money that the government can borrow because nobody wants to borrow against lend to a government that can't raise further revenue. So that's a beautiful thing about tariffs being an avoidable tax. The second purpose of tariffs, though, and this is the more important purpose, was to stimulate domestic production, to industrialize the newfound country. And this is what tariffs were used for all throughout the 1800s. America had the highest average tariff rate in the world in the 1800s. And of course, it's no surprise that during that time, America industrialized and became the world's factory. So this is what tariffs are for, ultimately. They're to promote domestic industry and domestic economic growth. The revenue side of things, it's not quite as important. So when I hear that the tariff revenue numbers are going up, I think that's fine in the short run. But in the long run, what we really want to do is see lower tariffs because that means people are buying American.
We also have seen tariffs used as a bargaining chip, so to speak. They've gone up and down. I've been recently involved in some construction, and I actually had to stop because on something that I would buy with no tariff, all of a sudden had tariffs on it. So you stop buying it, and in anticipation it's going to go back down. But to your point, do you think we'll settle down to where the tariffs are more fair across the board?
Yeah, I think that's ultimately the hope. I mean, people have to understand and have a little bit of patience. America's run a large chronic trade deficit every year since 1974. So it took us 50 years to get to this point where the country is not making a lot of the things that we ultimately should be making. This isn't going to be something that's corrected in, 6 months. This is a multi-year project, and tariffs are sort of at the cutting edge of that. But it's not, tariffs alone won't fix it. There's other domestic reforms that we need to do. For example, we should be focusing on getting access to cheap energy. Reducing regulations is always a good thing. But all of that is kind of pointless without tariffs because of these differences in the cost of doing business between, America, China, India.
I don't think America understood the tariff issue until the president held up that chart. And quite frankly, this has kind of been a bone in his craw even back, 20, 30 years ago when he was a young businessman. He saw this. You saw the interviews, and you know that. He saw the imbalances. And when he held up the chart, American kind of goes, oh, yeah, we see that now. But at the same time, America is paying some higher prices on some things. What does that tell you?
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly correct. I think it's important to remember that the way that tariffs function, the point of them is actually to make imports more expensive. And ultimately, what flows from that is domestic production, because rather than buying the expensive imports, people will buy American products. So there's
Hmm.
going to be a period of transition where it's likely that a lot of prices that we're importing a lot of products from are going to increase. But in the long run, what that's going to do is it's going to allow American entrepreneurs, American businessmen, American investors to build that manufacturing capacity here at home. And that will drive prices down in the long run. And I say that because that's what we saw for a century and a half, uh, up until the trade paradigm shifted in the 1970s.
The other part that's coming out of this is the president obviously is focusing on making America not only the number one market in the world, but by far the number one market in the world, to the point where now manufacturers are coming here to set up business. And the one thing, I guess that is obviously good. It takes time, a couple of years for those things to be built and get online.
Yes, sir.
The other part is the labor costs of leaving China and coming here. How much of a factor is that?
Yeah, so the cost of labor is a relatively large factor when you're talking about manufactured products. Um, However, it's becoming less important. And the reason for that is because workers are becoming a lot more productive due to automation, and we may see further gains from AI. Uh, so I think it's important to remember at this stage. So when a lot of these factories left, labor was a really big component. Now it's not so much. Materials costs, depending on the industry, are about 60% of the total cost of manufactured goods. Energy is again about 20%. Depending on the product, labor is maybe between 10 and 30% of the overall cost of the product. And I think we want an economy that prioritizes high labor prices, because the reality is that most Americans work for a living. Most Americans don't live on trust funds. So we want high labor prices. One of the things that we can do to offset that is to lower our materials costs and lower our energy costs. And if we were successful at doing that, uh, the price of goods is not going to go up. But I think we have to remember that we want high labor prices. We don't want to be racing to the bottom and competing for labor costs against China. We can only lose that game.
So we're on track this year for possibly $150 billion generated from tariffs. Who's the winner in that?
Well, my hope is that the American people will ultimately be the winner of that, because the tariffs are going to cause the reshoring of American industry. Now, there is a risk, though. The risk is that if the tariffs aren't high enough, they won't stimulate the reshoring. And as a result, they will simply generate revenue. So there'll basically be another tax. So we need to be very, very careful to make sure that the tariffs are high enough that we're actually incentivizing companies to reshore. If not, we're just saddling ourselves with another tax. And I don't like taxes. Nobody should like taxes. Tariffs can be used in a way that is not really to generate revenue, though. So we have to be careful about how we use them. It's a really powerful tool, but the risk is there that we could be saddling ourselves with additional tax burdens, which we don't want in the long run.
How long do you think we'll be in this adjustment zone?
Depends how high the tariffs are, and it depends how stable they are going forward. So, what President Trump needs to do is he needs to work with Congress to roll these tariffs into actual legislation, because we know that the Constitution gives Congress the power of the purse. So, right now, all of this has been done under the president's delegated authority, but it doesn't have the staying power until Congress gets in on it, basically. So, what we need is Congress to codify these tariffs for the long run. If that's done, I think that we're going to see an adjustment period. We could see an adjustment period of 2 years. That's what happened in the lead up to World War II. It could take longer than that if it's not done competently, though. And that's the risk of anything that the government does, is whether or not it's done competently.
Right, right. Um, is there an inflation risk with this?
Not particularly. What we've seen with the cost of goods uh, is that, well, let me put it to you this way. Uh, when America was under a high tariff regime for over 100 years, from 1789 up until the end of World War II. The cost of living went down. We had a deflation. Uh, the inflation spikes have occurred after tariffs were abandoned. And the reason for that is because we've started offshoring our production and we've created enormous foreign demand for US dollars. And this ultimately, this borrowing is what's causing the inflation. And the borrowing is itself a symptom of massive foreign demand for American dollars, which is caused again by this huge trade deficit. So if we get into a productive economy that's exporting more goods than we're importing, that is going to help with the inflation rate in the long run.
Tariffs are also currently also being used to put political pressure on situations. I mean, that's got to be tough on Americans, but if we're going to put high tariffs on a country because we don't like what they're doing politically, can we survive that?
Yeah, I think it's a great point that tariffs also have a geopolitical element to them. And the reason for this is because America is the world's largest consumer market. Everybody wants to have their goods on our shelves because they know they're going to make money here. Denying them access to our shelves is sort of like a sanction, especially to a smaller country with a less developed consumer market. So tariffs can be used as a powerful political tool. Ultimately, uh, the so-called damage that we could do to one of these countries is disproportionate to the any effect that would be felt in America. And the reason for that is because Americans have the ability to manufacture almost all of the products that we're importing. And for the products that we don't have the ability to manufacture, we can source them elsewhere. So, for example, we don't have to buy coffee from Brazil. We can buy coffee from 15 other countries that are happy to sell us coffee.
Okay, looking back a little bit, there was a time where just about all of our manufacturing went to China. In that process, part of the deal was that they had access to the intellectual property relative to that manufacturing. And now there's a great incentive to bring all of that back. I guess my question, Spencer, looking back, with American industry leaving the country and going to Mexico, China, Japan, wherever they went, was that intentional?
It's hard to speculate. It certainly looks intentional, though, because the writing has been on the wall for many, many years. I mean, you look all the way back to Ross Perot and Pat Buchanan. I mean, they were talking about this even pre-NAFTA. Of course, President Donald Trump was talking about this, I think, on Oprah back in 1984. That was right at the start of this offshoring crisis.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of really smart and frankly influential Americans have been talking about this issue for decades. And yet it's been steamrolled ahead. And all of the prognostications that these men, again, like Pat Buchanan, Ross Perot, and Donald Trump said, all of it came true. So they knew it was going to happen. So I think there's been a great financial incentive for certain players to do the offshoring.
Okay, but we're now creating a huge incentive for these manufacturers to come back, and they are slowly doing that.
That's the plan.
That's the plan.
That's the plan. We need more time to see if it's happening, though. I don't know if the rates are high enough across the board yet.
I'm just trying to figure out what in the world is in a Fortune 500 company that would do business in China and then allow them to have the intellectual property in addition to cheap labor. That's a high price, don't you think?
Well, not really. And the reason for that is because the cost of the technological theft is externalized to the American public at large. It's not really borne by the company because a lot of the companies that were manufacturing these products, all of their competition already had access to most of that technology.
Mm.
The difference is that all of that competition was American at one stage, and now it's not. So when you have a multinational company that doesn't care about borders, doesn't care about the American people, and their only incentive is profit and to outcompete their rivals, they don't really care if those costs are externalized on the American people.
All right, I'm going to get you back. We're out of time, but quickly, what do you want people to take away from Reshore?
I think the most important thing that they can get out of Reshore is to understand their own history. Tariffs are not a new solution. They're the classical American solution to these problems. These problems were faced by the founding fathers, and they've already been solved. So really, we should be looking to our own history to figure out how to deal with, offshoring to China or India.
That's well put. The book is entitled Reshore, How the Tariffs Will Bring Our Jobs Home and Revive the American Dream. There's a picture of the cover of the book on the screen there by Spencer Morrison. Available online, Amazon, etc.
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. And check out where he is editor-in-chief of the National Economic Editorial. And there's a picture of that landing page as well. Thank you, Spencer, for your time, buddy. Take care.
Thanks a lot. God bless.
You too.